also in the Spanish room.
You can start now.
Is the Spanish interpreter going to start speaking?
I can do that right now if you'd like me to.
Please begin. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Buenos días a todos. Si usted está escuchando mi voz, se encuentra usted en la reunión en la sala principal. En un momento vamos a dar inicio a la presentación. Si usted desea escuchar esta presentación en español de forma simultánea, en el chat he compartido las instrucciones de cómo hacerlo. De todas maneras, en la parte baja de su pantalla va a encontrar 3 puntitos donde puede encontrar los cuadros que dicen Breakout Rooms o cuartos de reunión separados. Hemos creado un breakout room en español para que usted pueda escuchar la presentación de forma simultánea. Si usted desea participar de forma simultánea y escuchar esta presentación en español, todo lo que tiene que hacer es hacer clic en la parte baja de su pantalla, escoger el breakout room de español y trasladarse a esa ubicación para que podamos continuar. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Lori Paris, and thank you for joining us at today's listening session. I am the Chief of Staff with the Prince George's County Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. And I am joined today by several of my colleagues from DPIE. Also with me today is Aspasia Exfolia, Director of the Prince George's County Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as members of her team. As you know, Prince George's County Council enacted the Permanent Rent Stabilization and Protection Act of 2024 last October. This new law is designed to protect renters from excessive rent increases while ensuring landlords can maintain their properties. Prince George's County is in the process of drafting regulations and creating policies and procedures to implement this new law. Our meeting today is one in a series of virtual and in-person listening sessions to seek the input of stakeholders and interested parties as we move forward with this process of crafting regulations and policies. Today's listening session will be moderated by John Manivel of Oculus Consulting. John is supporting Prince George's County in the rollout of this new law. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to your comments and input. Our entire team at the county will be carefully listening to your feedback today. John, take it away.
Thank you very much, Lori. And thank you to everyone who has taken time from their schedules to join us today to provide feedback regarding the implementation of the Permanent Rent Stabilization and Protection Act. A special thank you to the team at Prince George's County who have joined us today in this listening session. I will be assisted today by Avis Thomas Lester, Yvette Gales, Delvin Logan, and Candace Taylor from DPIE. They will be keeping us on track to solicit your feedback and input during our time together today. I'm going to start off with a brief PowerPoint presentation of just a few slides to provide an overview of the Permanent Rent Stabilization and Protection Act, the key milestones in its implementation, how you can continue to share your input and track our progress going forward, and the logistics for today's listening session. After my presentation, we will pivot to an opportunity for comment and input from everyone who is interested in sharing their thoughts. A quick housekeeping note. The county will be posting today's PowerPoint presentation on its website later this week. Yvette, please move on to the next slide. Thank you. As Lori noted, the Permanent Rent Stabilization and Protection Act was enacted into law on October 17th of 2024. As required under the law, the county must draft and adopt regulations and create policies and procedures to implement this new law. As the county moves forward, it is holding this and several other listening sessions to benefit from the valuable input of stakeholders and interested parties at an early stage in the process. Yvette, please move to the next slide. There are several important provisions of this new law which are outlined on this slide. As I'll discuss in just a minute, the county will be spending the next year developing the regulations and policies and procedures to provide detail regarding the exact manner in which these provisions will be implemented. Some provisions of the law are already in effect. When the law was enacted last October, the limitation on rent increases for regulated units became effective immediately. At that time, a notice was issued to property owners and posted to the county's website regarding the rent increase limitation for regulated units of 3.3% for age-restricted properties and 6% for all other properties. These rent increase limitations are in effect until June 30th, 2025. You may note that I said regulated units a few times in my comments. It's important to understand that the law does not apply to every single rental unit in the county. The law includes a listing of rental units that are not subject to the rent increase allowances I just mentioned. These exemptions took effect immediately upon the law's passage last year. Other key aspects of the law that will take effect by February 1st, 2026 are listed on this slide. The county recognizes that these provisions are of great interest to many stakeholders, and we look forward to receiving your input and thoughts about the best manner in which to implement. Yvette, please move to the next slide. As outlined on this slide, there are a few important milestones to keep in mind with regards to this new law. As I noted above, when the law was enacted, the limitation on rent increases for regulated units and exemptions became effective immediately. As we work on the regulations and policies during the course of this year, it is important to recognize that a new rent increase allowance will take effect on July 1st, 2025. The county is required to publish this new rent increase allowance by no later than May 1st, 2025, so that property owners and tenants have enough time to implement the new limit. As discussed in the previous slide, there are other provisions of the Permanent Rent Stabilization and Protection Act that will take effect on February 1st, 2026, which is just about a year from today. Yvette, please move to the next slide. All right. Thanks for your attention so far. We'll now spend the rest of our time today providing an opportunity for comments from you. I want to remind everyone that the county's primary goal today is to listen to your comments. This isn't a question and answer session because the county is still in the very early stages of implementation of this new law. We are going to start with individuals who signed up ahead of time, and then move on to anyone else who wants to speak. In the interest of time and providing an opportunity for as much input as possible, please limit your comments to 2 minutes. We'll use a timer to help you gauge how much time you have left. Finally, keep in mind that there is nearly a year until the county must finalize the regulations and procedures to implement many of the provisions of this new law. I'll do my best to keep everyone on track, but your cooperation and courtesy is greatly appreciated. Yvette, please move to the next slide. One last item before we get started. Earlier, I mentioned that today's PowerPoint presentation will be posted to the county's website later this week. Additionally, there are a number of other important resources you may want to familiarize yourself with as we move forward this year. The county will be regularly updating its website, frequently asked questions, and answering calls and emails regarding your questions and input. Okay, we're going to move on to listening to your comments and suggestions. Again, I'll start by calling out individuals who signed up ahead of time, and then move on to anyone else who wants to speak. For those of you who signed up ahead of time, I will call your name. When I call your name, if you are in the room, please raise your hand electronically, and Avis or Yvette will unmute you. The first person who signed up ahead of time is Allie Milner. Allie, if you're in the room, please raise your hand electronically and somebody will unmute you. All right, go ahead, Allie.
Good morning. I'm trying to go off camera, but I don't know if that's permitted, but that's okay. So good morning. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Allie Milner. I'm the Emergency Services Manager for Laurel Advocacy and Referral Services. We work with many folks in the Prince George's County zip codes of 20707 and 20708 who reside in Laurel, Maryland. And I just want to thank you for the focus on this need in the community for regulation. We are constantly seeing folks every day who are impacted by rent increases and just the affordability of living in the area. And so we see that there is such an importance in making sure there is continuing to be a focus on safe and equitable rental homes in the community. So thank you so much for the focus on this. And just wanted to speak some of the concerns that I've heard from some of our clients of just the rental increases that they're seeing, and even the cap that has been put out on how the percent increase that is allowable for landlords is being interpreted as the standard. So there is a bit of a concern that with the cap being placed, that landlords are taking that as okay, well, this is the highest amount I can get, so that's what I'm going to ask for. And many of our clients, can't afford and can't continue their safe housing when they're getting even something like a $100 increase whenever they're renewing their lease. $100 could mean, putting food on the table for their family or making that car payment. And if they're having to decide between these two things, we're going to continue to see families struggle if we can't get a handle on just the high cost of rentals in the community. So appreciate everyone's attention to this. This is definitely a need that we need to continue pushing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Allie. The next person who signed up ahead of time was Deborah Hart. Deborah, if you're in the room, raise your hand electronically and someone will unmute you. Okay, doesn't look like Deborah's here. We're going to move on to the next person who signed up ahead of time. Ashley Robinson, if you're in the room, please raise your hand and someone will unmute you. All right, I don't think Ashley's here. Let's move on to the next person who signed up ahead of time. Dwayne Mingo, if you're in the room, please raise your hand and somebody will unmute you. All right, let's move on to the next and final person who signed up ahead of time, Martin Mitchell. Martin, if you're in the room, please unmute yourself, or please raise your hand and someone will unmute you. Okay, doesn't look like Martin's here. So now that we've gone through hearing from everyone who signed up ahead of time, it's now time to hear from anyone else who would like to share their thoughts. Please raise your hand electronically and Avis or Yvette will unmute you. And we'll work through everybody who's in the room who has comments to share today. All right, screen name is LK, has raised their hand. LK, you're on, go ahead.
Hey, I have two questions about this. The first one being, I personally do not like raising rent on some of my tenants if they've been great and are, great on paying on time, great with everything else. So I would like to see something where, and obviously if my costs increase, and I do have to consider that. So I would like to see some sort of accommodation where if a landlord doesn't raise rent for every single year, there's some sort of allowance built into that. Now I understand that if I don't raise rent for 5 years, that it would be quite the shock to raise it, whatever 3 plus CPI is times 5. But I think there can be a compromise to say, hey, if you haven't done it, potentially some of that can carry over, or a way to quote unquote not lose out based on just doing, what presumably the tenant wants, which is not raising the rent at all.
Okay, I think you said there were two things, or is that you just covered everything?
No, so I have a second thing is I've had some questions or issues with housing in the past where I've tried to get questions answered, and I literally escalated up to the top, the director's office for literally about 6 months and could not hear back. The only I know after I Googled everybody that's on staff at the top, the most I could get was an assistant that said someone will call you back over and over. No one did. And actually, one of the people on this chat, Espacia, is one of the people I emailed. So I do see one of the concerns is if you want to put in the exception to raise rent beyond what's the standard, you can reach out to housing. Communication wasn't great before. So if people at the director's office won't respond, how can we be sure we'll get a timely response regarding that?
Okay. All right, well, thank you for those 2 points. As I mentioned at the beginning, this isn't a question and answer session per se. If there's something really, straightforward, I'll answer it. Both of the issues you raised are relatively nuanced. And what I would encourage you to do is provide your specific comments in writing to the email address that is at the bottom of this slide. on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer what we can at this point based on what the law says, and keep you engaged as we go through the year and adopt the actual policies, procedures, and regulations that may be more on point with the questions you asked. We
Okay.
respond to the questions quickly, and if it's a question that's not related to rent stabilization, your question will get forwarded to the right person in the county.
Okay, so if I already brought those 2 points, I don't want to clutter up that inbox. Is it basically going to the same source, or only if I have additional questions I should email? Or do you want me to put down?
I would encourage you to take what you just said and email it,
Okay.
so that we have a record of your inquiry, and we'll respond to it accordingly.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. If you like to share a comment, please raise your hand. I think we had somebody who was, I think maybe Emily Wasser wants to speak. If somebody could unmute Emily. Or maybe she was clapping her hands. I'm not entirely sure. So I don't want to put her on the spot if she didn't want to ask a question or share a comment.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Emily.
I
You're
have
on.
a kind of a similar comment. I am a small landlord, a owner of single family properties, but I own enough that this law applies to me. And my standard policy has been, if my tenants want to stay, I never raise the rent. I let them stay for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, never raise the rent. Then when they finally move out, I adjust the rent to be what the market is. But this law does not make that easy. You can bank increases, but not enough to catch up for like multi-years worth at one time. So the fallout of this new law is that I'm changing my policy. And instead of allowing tenants to stay for the same rent for as long as they want to stay, I'm going to start raising a little every year. So I just want the people who wrote this law to know that, maybe this law may have consequences that are different from what they intended.
Okay. Thank you, Emily, for your very clear comment. I appreciate that greatly. And again, if you want to put that in writing and send it to the mailbox, that's fine. At the same time, we are recording this session, so what you're saying isn't being forgotten by any means. All right, so I'm scanning the room. If you're interested in sharing some comments, please raise your hand and someone will unmute you. I'll make another call out for comments, and while folks think that over, I'll just remind everybody the PowerPoint that's being presented today, and which includes this slide with the resources regarding this new law, will be posted to the county's website, be available there by the end of the week. And I see we have a hand raised by Emily Button. Will somebody unmute Emily?
Hi there. I'm Emily Button. I am a Prince George's County resident and also with the Maryland State DHCD newly created Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs. And so I just wanted to say hello and introduce myself, and that I'm listening in on this group as we build out that office to be able to serve both tenants and landlords and be aware of concerns that may be coming up in local changes to rent and landlord tenant laws. So I'll stick my contact information in the chat. We're a fairly new office with the state, and I just mostly wanted to attend to have a finger on the pulse and introduce myself.
Thank you very much, Emily. Thanks for being a resource. And thanks for those comments. All right. I do see Emily's hand is still up. Emily, if you still want to talk, keep your hand up. But if you just have not taken it down, just take your hand down. Thank you. All right, I see Emily put her contact info in the chat. Thank you, Emily. All right, if you have something you'd like to share, please raise your hand. All right, let's give this another 30 seconds or so. Anybody want to share some comments, please raise your hand. I'll remind everybody the PowerPoint will be on the website. And these are some great resources for you to follow up with us about, learn more about the law, send your comments via email. You'll want to keep checking these resources for updated information as the county goes through the process of implementing this new law throughout the course of this year. All right, Yvette, could you move to our final slide then? All right, a big thank you to everybody who shared their comments today. We also appreciate everybody who attended. It's really great to be able to have the opportunity to share this information, and we look forward to your continued input throughout the rest of this year. Have a great rest of your day and rest of the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.